Hello and welcome to this tutorial. And in this tutorial we'll be continuing with the code which we have left in the previous tutorial. So basically in the previous tutorial we have completed the code till the buffered writer. So buffered writer was basically used to write the data so that we could insert this data into the database. Now I've added the next line of code. So the reason for adding the next line of code directly is that while recording this I might encounter an error in while writing the syntax. So basically I am going to explain what I did here. So basically I have created a new string which is data, and the reason for creating this string is that we basically need to encode some information in this string. So basically we have used the URL encoder to basically encode the data. So I have typed URL encoder dot encode, and the first parameter which I have passed here is the name. Then the second parameter is the actual encoding format, and after this I have again passed in the name and the encoding format. So we have done this thing for the name, and I have just typed in the code for encoding the name, and we are going to type in the code for basically encoding everything else. So we also need to encode the password, contact and country. So I'm going to basically copy and paste the same thing 3 times so that we could basically encode the entire data. So after name, the next thing which we need to encode is going to be the password. So simply type in password here, and I misspelled password. Okay, and also change this name to password as well. Change this name to contact, change this thing to contact, change this name to country, and finally change this name to country. Okay, now once we are done with this, we are good to go. So we have basically encoded all the data and we have saved it all into the variable or into the string variable data. Now we could actually use the buffered writer to actually save the data or actually pass in the data to the database, and also make sure that at the end you simply need to delete this and add a semicolon over here. So now let's go ahead and write in the data to the buffered writer. So we go ahead and type in buffered writer dot write and simply pass in the data which we have. So this is basically data over here. So once we have passed in the data, we are good to go. Now we actually need to flush the buffered writer. So we type buffered writer dot flush. So this is basically going to flush the buffered writer, and finally we need to close the buffered writer. So we type buffered writer dot close. So once we have closed the buffered writer, we also need to close the output stream. So we type os dot close. So this method is basically going to close the buffered writer, and finally we actually need to return something over here. So we type return, and let's say this says registration success, and as soon as we add a return over here, it is going to show us an error. And the reason for that is basically when we go in the do in background, as you could see, the type of this method is void. So basically it is going to return nothing. So basically let's go ahead and change this to string, and what this thing does is that it basically allows us to return a string over here. And also we need to change this parameter to string so as to get rid of the error. So once we change this to string, as you could see, the error actually disappeared. And also we need to change this thing to string as well. So instead of a void, let's type in string, and instead of this a void, let's replace this to result, and also let's go ahead and replace this to result as well. So basically once all the methods are done, the code which we want to execute on basically executing everything lies in the post execute method. So this is a registration process through an Android application. So let's say after everything is completed successfully, we actually want to display a message via a toast like registration is successful. So in that case we also make a toast here. So we type toast dot make text and simply pass in the context to this toast. So we type ctx, then pass in the message which is result, then type in toast dot length long, and finally use a method called as show. Okay, so what we have done here is that we have basically created a toast which basically allows us to raise a toast when we actually are successful in inserting these values into the database. So once we are done with this, we are good to go. Now the only few things which are remaining is that we actually need to go inside the register.java, and actually we need to go right here inside the register user method, and we actually need to finish it. So we type finish. Okay, so once this is done, we are good to go. Now we actually need to go inside the manifest and grant permission to this application to use internet. So we type users permission android.permission.internet. Okay, so now once this thing is done, what we need to do is that we again need to go to the main activity, and as you might know, whenever we start the application, the first activity to start is going to be the main activity, and this is the main activity right here, and we basically need a method to switch from this thing to the register activity. So we are basically going to create a small button over here, and we are going to name it as register, or let's say go to register, and I think I made a mistake here. This is register. Okay, and basically we are going to go into properties, and to the on click of this we are going to add in a method name. So basically search for a property called on click. Okay, so to the on click of this we type in go to register, and I'm going to copy this thing, and after this we switch back to the main activities Java and create a method over here. So we type public void, name this thing as the on click, pass in the view. After passing the view, simply create a new intent over here so as to switch from one activity to other. So we type intent equals new intent, and basically to this intent the first parameter we pass is this, and the next parameter is going to be the name of the class to which we want to switch to. So that is nothing but register dot class. Now let's go ahead and use the start activity method so as to basically start the intent. So we type start activity and simply pass in the intent over here. So now once we are done with this, we are good to go. So we simply save the code, and what this thing is going to do is that whenever we go to the main activity and click this button, it is going to redirect us to this activity so that we could basically fill in these fields and hit this button so as to basically insert the values into the database. So now the only thing which remains is that we basically need to make changes to the files which are nothing but the register.php. So in order to make changes to the register.php, simply go into XAMPP, go to htdocs, and the name of our folder is project, and this is the file which is nothing but register.php. So I'm going to open this thing up in Atom, and I've actually already made the changes to this file. So if we open it, you will be able to find the changes which we have made, and I'm also going to explain what all changes we have made to this file. So as you could see, these are the changes which I have made to the file. So the very first thing which I have done here is that I have basically used the same script, but the only changes which I have made is that instead of using the what you could say ready-made variables, so right here we had a line like let's say dollar password equals, and we might have a password like ashu123. so this was the line of code which was present initially. Now what I have done is that I have simply changed the variable names a little bit, and basically instead of the actual values of the variables, I have put a post over here. So make sure that you make the relevant changes in your PHP script, and also you need to comment out the echo statements in this file which is register.php as well as in the init.php. So make sure that you do the relevant changes, and once you are done with this, we are basically good to go. So simply save this file, and finally we can run our Android application. So basically when I tried to run this application, I actually was not able to insert values into the database, and the reason is that I almost forgot to add a line of code which is to basically get the input stream. So I finally added this line of code right here, and let's see now if the application actually works. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to make this source code of the entire application available to you, so that even if you face an error, you could simply copy the code and you could actually use in the code so as to basically run this application. So now let's go ahead and save the application. So even before trying to run this application, we actually need to start the servers. So make sure that on the XAMPP control panel, the Apache and MySQL is actually started. Now once this is started, to make sure that the server is up and running, simply open up Mozilla and just type in localhost. So we type in localhost, and yeah, as you could see, our server is up and running. So now let's go ahead and run this application on the emulator. So as you could see, the application is up and running on the emulator. So when we hit this button right here which says go to register, we'll be prompted with this thing right here. Now let's insert some random stuff into it. So let's say the first thing is Apple. Let's say the second one is, let's say, AAA. Let's say this is RRR, and let's say this is EE and E. So we just insert some random data to check if this thing works and hit insert. So as you could see, it displayed a toast which says registration success. Now actually we have created a table for users, but to test it if this thing actually works, we have just entered random data into it. Now we actually got the confirmation as registration was successful, but in order to actually check if the registration was successful, we open up localhost. So open up the web browser and simply go to localhost, go to phpMyAdmin and go to the project database, which is our database, and inside there we have a table called users. So as you could see, the last row, it says Apple, AAA, RRR and EEE. So basically we are successful in inserting the values into the database, which is nothing but the local database. So that's it for this tutorial, and I hope you guys understood how to basically insert values into the database. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thank you.